I canceled our wedding after my fiance's outrageous demand left me stunned. Looking back now, it all seems like a bad dream. One of those slow, creeping nightmares where everything feels off, but you can't quite put your finger on why until it's too late. That's how it was with me and Lauren. I never thought I'd be the type of person who would break off an engagement right before the wedding. I always thought when you got engaged, it meant you were committed, that you'd figured it all out. But I hadn't. I'd been living in a fantasy, ignoring the warning signs, pretending everything was fine. Because after all, isn't that what you're supposed to do when you love someone? It wasn't that we didn't have problems, every couple does. But I convinced myself that our problems were small, manageable things we'd work through together. I was wrong. I had no idea how wrong I was until her demand came crashing down on me like a tidal wave, pulling me under and forcing me to confront the truth that I'd been avoiding for months. We had been together for 3 years. I remember how perfect everything felt at the beginning, how easy it was to be with her. We had met through mutual friends at a party, one of those situations where everything just clicked. I was immediately drawn to her confidence, her intelligence, the way she could command a room with just a smile. We spent the entire night talking, lost in conversation while the party went on around us. By the end of it, I knew I wanted to see her again, and I did. Our relationship progressed quickly, but it felt right. We were in love, deeply, or so I thought. Within a year we had moved in together. I remember the excitement of finding our first apartment, the thrill of starting a life together. It felt like everything was falling into place. We were young, successful, and happy. We talked about our future often, about the house we'd buy, the trips we'd take, and eventually the family we'd start together. I never doubted for a second that she was the one. So, when I proposed a year and a half into our relationship, it felt like the natural next step. She said yes, of course, and everything was perfect, for a while. Planning the wedding was stressful, as weddings often are, but we were managing, or at least I thought we were. Lauren was meticulous about the details, something I admired in her at first. She wanted everything to be perfect, and I was happy to let her take the lead. I trusted her judgment, believed in her vision. We agreed on most things, but there were a few areas where we didn't see eye to eye. Looking back now, those were the first cracks in the foundation, the first signs that something was wrong, though I didn't realize it at the time. It started with small things: the guest list, the venue, the color scheme. She was insistent on having a big wedding, something extravagant and over the top. I had imagined something more intimate, more personal. But I let it slide. After all, it was her day too, and I wanted her to be happy. That's what you do when you love someone, right? You compromise. You put their happiness above your own. But as the months went on, her demands became more and more extreme. She insisted on flying in a famous floral designer from New York, someone I'd never even heard of, but whose services cost more than I'd ever thought possible. She wanted custom-made invitations, imported linens, and a cake that looked more like a piece of modern art than something edible. Every decision seemed to be about appearances, about impressing our guests, about creating the kind of wedding that people would talk about for years. It wasn't about us anymore. It wasn't about our love or our commitment to each other. It was about her image, her desire to have the perfect day. But I kept my mouth shut, telling myself that it didn't matter, that as long as we ended up married, it was worth it. Then came the final demand, the one that shattered everything. We were sitting in our living room one night, going over the last-minute details for the wedding, which was only a month away at this point. I was exhausted, having spent the entire day fielding calls from vendors and trying to finalize the seating chart. But she seemed energized, more focused than I had ever seen her. She was talking about the rehearsal dinner, about how she wanted it to be a black tie event, when she suddenly dropped the bomb. "I've been thinking," she said, her tone casual, like she was discussing the weather. "I don't want your family to come to the wedding." At first, I didn't understand what she was saying. I stared at her, waiting for the punchline, convinced she had to be joking. My family had been nothing but supportive of our relationship. They had welcomed her with open arms, treated her like one of their own. Why on earth would she want to exclude them? She must have seen the confusion on my face because she quickly explained, "It's not that I don't like them," she said, her voice smooth and reassuring as though she were trying to soften the blow. "But they don't really fit with the vibe I'm going for. You know how your mom can be a little overbearing. And your dad, well, he's nice, but he's not exactly the most polished person. I just don't think they'd really add to the atmosphere." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. My heart sank as the full weight of her words settled over me. She didn't want my family at our wedding, at my wedding, because they didn't fit the vibe. My family, who had loved me unconditionally, who had supported me through everything, who had been excited about this wedding from the moment we announced it, was being reduced to an inconvenience, something to be hidden away to avoid embarrassment in front of her high society friends and colleagues. I sat there in stunned silence, my mind racing. This couldn't be real. This couldn't be the woman I was about to marry. How could she be so shallow, so cruel? How could she even suggest something like that, knowing how much my family meant to me? But the more she talked, the more I realized that she was serious. She didn't see anything wrong with what she was asking. To her, this was just another detail to be sorted out, another decision to make in the pursuit of the perfect wedding. And the worst part? She genuinely believed I would go along with it, that I would choose her vision of the perfect day over my own family.